Can you hear me all right in the back? All right, I've been watching for visual cues because I've often been told that I speak too fast. So I'll try to look up and look for visual cues, so please feel free to say something if I'm talking too fast. Today is Father's Day. This year on Father's Day, I've been thinking about what it means to be a father. And I'm thinking about fatherhood in the most general terms. That is, I've been thinking not only about men who are fathers to our children, but other kinds of fatherhood. George Washington is called the father of our country. And for that matter, Lyle Ritz is called the father of the jazz ukulele. The word fatherhood covers all of these things, and I've been thinking about the thread that runs through all of these different uses of the word fatherhood. Well, I believe there's a thread that runs through them all, and in order to tell you about this thread that runs through all of these senses of fatherhood, I'm going to tell you a story about a man who had no children of his own. Back in 1972, Harvey Milk moved to San Francisco to open a camera store. Milk was an openly gay man who lived with his partner, Scott Smith. Now remember, in 1972, it was much more difficult to live as an openly gay man than it is today. Milk was also an organizer and a community activist who not only found himself being called the mayor of the Castro, a sort of figurehead for San Francisco's gay community, but who was also adept at building solid alliances with a variety of people and ethnic groups. And with the help of these alliances, in 1977, Milk was elected to the city's Board of Supervisors. Harvey Milk was one of the first openly gay persons elected to public office in the United States. Milk only served for a short term, however. There was another member of the Board of Supervisors, a man named Dan White, who had run for office proclaiming that he was going to rid San Francisco of radicals and social deviants. White was the only openly anti-gay member of the Board of Supervisors. In 1978, Dan White decided to resign his office. The mayor at that time, George Moscone, accepted White's resignation, and then White changed his mind and tried to take back his resignation. George Moscone, with the encouragement of Harvey Milk, refused to allow White to do so. This enraged Dan White so much that he got a gun, stuffed extra ammunition into his pockets, broke into the city hall through an unlocked window to avoid the metal detectors, and then shot both George and Harvey Milk dead in their offices. When a singer-songwriter, Holly Near, heard about the shootings, she wrote the song "Singing for Our Lives," which is sometimes called the song for Harvey Milk. Now, many San Franciscans were outraged by the shootings, and the way I've read the story, Holly Near sang the song in order to turn people's angers away from merely destructive violence and rioting towards lasting social transformation. As it was rioting after Dan White's trial, he got off with voluntary manslaughter after a jury believed his defense attorneys who said that White's mental capacity had been diminished by eating too many Twinkies, which is now referred to as the Twinkie defense. White was sentenced to a mere 7 years in prison. The rank injustice of this life sentence led to the White Night riots in San Francisco on May 21st, 1979. In the end, Dan White was released on parole in 1985. And less than a year later, he committed suicide. His hatred and the anger took over his life, and he turned it all on himself. But let's get back to Harvey Milk's lasting legacy. Even though he only served as an elected official for less than 2 years, Harvey Milk served as a hero and inspiration to many people. Even Time magazine recognized him as one of the 100 most important people of the 20th century. I feel Harvey Milk's legacy has been to show us how to build alliances with those who are different from us. When he was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Harvey Milk said to his supporters, "This is not my victory, it's yours. If a gay man can win, it proves that there is hope for all minorities who are willing to fight." He's not a hero because he inspired Holly Near to write a song. He's not a hero because he was openly gay and got shot dead by some hate-filled anti-gay man. He's a hero because he stood up for an eternal principle, that there is hope for us when we build bonds between ourselves and other human beings. While Harvey Milk and his partner never had children of their own, it strikes me that Harvey Milk had the essence of fatherhood in him. He stood up for the rights of all minorities, in exactly the same way that good fathers will stand up for their children. And when I talk about good fathers who stand up for their children, I don't mean those horrible sports fathers who assault other kids' parents when their own kids strike out or fumble the ball. The kind of sports fathers merely using his child as a means to fill his own need for power and control. No, I'm talking about the kind of fatherhood that values children as ends in themselves. The kind of fatherhood that helps children become the best they can without trying to reshape them into the image of what their father thinks they should be. It's the kind of fatherhood that is motivated primarily by unselfish love. William Ellery Channing, a Unitarian preacher in 1819, tells us, if we're going to talk about God as a kind of father, then we must ascribe to God not just the name Father, but also the best characteristics of a good father. If we want to talk about God as a father figure, we must affirm that such a God will have the same unstinting love for others that a good father has for his children. The same desire that others may improve themselves that a good father displays. The same joy in the progress of others that a good father takes in the progress of his children. The same willingness to forgive that a good father feels towards his children. And the same ability to met out injustice. The same ability to met out justice when it is needed that a good father has with his children. I have to admit this sounds hopelessly idealistic. What human being can live up to such vision of fatherhood? If this old Unitarian description of God the Father is meant to describe a religious ideal to help us guide us fallible human beings. William Ellery Channing gives us as a religious principle an ideal of fatherhood that combines joy, forgiveness, justice, love, and equity. Even if many of us no longer view God as some kind of father figure, we can still appreciate this religious ideal of a good father, an impossible ideal, an ideal which can inspire us, an ideal from which we can draw strength. It serves as an example of our Unitarian heritage. Turning to our Unitarian heritage, we turn from the specific idealistic vision of fatherhood to a more fundamental principle. And that is the principle that all human beings are worthy of love. When the old Universalists spoke of the fatherhood of God, they meant that God's love must extend to all human beings, for each and every human being is worthy of love. The old Universalists knew that God could not be a hateful, hurtful God with flashing eyes and a thirst for vengeance. They knew that God's core must be of love. Indeed, they said of their Father God, that God is love. I take this to mean that from a religious point of view, the essence of fatherhood is an all-encompassing, forgiving love. Their notion of fatherhood began with the love of one's own children and went far beyond that. Some of the Universalists read their Bibles pretty literally, and they indeed believed that the first humans were actual creations of God, and therefore, in a real sense, God's own children. Many Christian groups have interpreted the Bible with the understanding that the members of their little group are the only true descendants of God, the only true children of God, and therefore God does not extend love to anyone outside their little group. But those old Universalists knew that God's caring love extended to all human beings, to all persons. This kind of fatherly love knows no bounds. This kind of love goes beyond one's immediate children to all humanity, because all of humanity must be God's children. This was a basic religious principle of those old Universalists. Though we might use different terminology today than those old Unitarians and Universalists use, certainly we've grown beyond the need to understand God as exclusively male, as exclusively a father. Now we can understand the concept of God to include both mother and father. We can also choose to reject the concept of God completely. Nevertheless, we still draw inspiration from those old Unitarian and Universalist God images. Inspiration which can help us better understand the basic religious principles at the root of fatherhood. What are those basic religious principles? Harvey Milk, although I'm not aware that he belonged to a religious community, lived out the religious principles that I'm talking about. Harvey Milk started his career of public service with those closest to him, the gay and lesbian community of San Francisco. But he extended his concern, his care, you might say his love, except that we're unaccustomed to talking about love in relation to politics. He extended his care and concern beyond his immediate community and included other minority communities. We would say he was the father of a broad-based coalition of people, all working towards justice and equity for all. Now, I don't mean to elevate Harvey Milk to sainthood, but he did build alliances and relationships to include all kinds of people, and in this sense, he represents a wider love for all of humanity. He's not a saint, but is the father of a small but influential political movement in the city of San Francisco. He has set a worthy example for us to emulate here in our own cities. Before I end, I'd like to return just a moment to Holly Near's song. In the song, she tells us that we're singing for our lives. As a singer-songwriter, she immediately thinks of music as a way to combine love with the energy that comes from anger. But we know that religion can do the same thing for us. The energy from the anger that will drive us to address injustice, while the love will allow us to do justice with compassion and to transform the world without stooping to violence. On this Father's Day, may we remember this basic religious principle. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, and as religious people, our mission shall be to spread the doctrine of love. So that ended a little shorter than I expected. I might get a few more minutes for a coffee hour. But let's take us into our closing hymn. Thank you. Baseball games and football games, but when I was in the Army, just finished up basic training. We were like in our last phase, whenever we'd come back from, I think, our evening march or evening meal, we'd sing that outside the barracks before we went into the night. I don't know, it was patriotic to us. It was just something we've seen the other classes do, and it just really bonded 200 or 300 of us. But in closing, we extinguish this flame, not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.